Alright, this is a real quick one this time. I just wanted to show you a quick trick for adding some surface definition. And what I'm going to do here is, right now this robe looks like some sort of one-piece construction, as if it was stamped out of a piece of plastic or something. I want to add a seam to the shoulders to indicate that it was probably made of two pieces, and maybe a hint of a seam along the side. Perhaps there's an inner lining and an outer cloth for the garment. So let's go to our tunic layer. That's what we're looking at right there. And I'm going to do a really quick way of doing seams. A seam is where two edges are going to meet, and they will curve inward slightly. One edge will catch a highlight, and the other edge will catch a shadow, depending on their orientation. So I'm going to go with my brush, I'm going to go with multiply, and I'm going to use a soft-edged brush, and I want a seam that's going to run, say, right along here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a dark color off of this robe, and I'm just going to say multiply. 70% is probably a bit much. Let's say 50% and see what we get. And alright, that was probably not enough, but we'll go over it a couple of times, and that'll keep us from having to blend it because we'll get a nice soft edge. I'll just keep working my way out. And we don't want it to be too obvious. We want subtlety here. Alright, so that would be one edge of our seam, and then the other side would catch the light, so let's pull a lighter color there. And let's set that. Let's see if we can get an even lighter color than that. Let's pull a highlight off of there. And we're going to set this to, oh no wonder my opacity was 5%, not 50%. Let's pull that to screen, and it's going to have to be a lot more than that. Let's take it up to about 15% and see what we get. Now, this shadow here would be since we have established that the light is coming from in front of the figure and from this side, from his right, the light is going to fall in this direction. It's going to fall from the upper left of the picture to the lower right, and from front to back. So this dark line here would indicate the edge of this half of the fabric as it bends away from the viewer. So the back half is going to carry a bit of a highlight. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm just going to mark in my highlight. And again, this doesn't have to be all that obvious. It can be fairly subtle, and we might even wind up doing some blending. Okay. So there we have a seam. I'm going to do a little bit of blending to make it look a little more natural. Let's take our blending tool, probably a bit large, and let's take the strength of the blending tool around 40%. We don't want to obscure the difference between the two. And we can pull this around, pull this dark value up, that dark value down, pull that around and out, and do the same thing here. And maybe just a little bit of unevenness in the whole thing. Make our blend tool smaller, bring the strength up just a bit. And if we pull these away a little bit, we will give more of an illusion of cloth. Again, want to be subtle. So at this distance it'll show, but it's not terribly obvious. And let's do the same thing along the edge here to give the illusion of fabric. So let's do our upper edge first. So we'll go to our brush, pull that out, set to multiply, and we can keep it around 14%. I think that 5% was a bit light, and that's still a bit light. Let's try around 30%. And we'll pull a seam out along there. That's probably better. It's a bit of a stiff fabric, so it's going to have some weight to it. Let's switch to our blend tool, and I'll fix this business right here. Let's pull that shadow out there. Okay, and let's go ahead and fix this inner shadow here a little bit. Remember, I have transparency lock turned on, so even though this tunic layer is on top of the robe layer, I can't paint out past the edges. All right, let's go back to our brush tool. We're still on multiply. Let's go ahead and pull that a little bit of shadow on that right there to give it some more definition. Now let's go back to our light value here again. Let's pull that off of here. And remember that top edge is, change it to screen. That top edge is going to be the one that holds the highlight. So we'll do the same thing down there. And now it looks a lot more like fabric. We're going to do one more thing down here to the boots. We're going to put a seam for the center of the boot. Now, I don't know if I'm going to like this. So what I'm going to do is, since I do want to actually paint on the surface of the boot, because I want to pull up a lot of those colors, but I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. I'm not sure if I'm going to like the results. I'm going to take my boots layer, I'm going to drag it down here to the new layer level, and that's just going to create a copy of the boots. I'll hide that copy. I'm going to work on the original. But that way, if, for instance, I do something I don't like, let me go to my eraser and do something horrible to these boots. What have I done? I can always bring back the original. No matter how far along I've gone, even if I've saved and closed and opened the file in the meantime. So let's go back to our duplicated layer. We'll go back to boots. And I'm going to want to pull the seam up here. This will do a couple of things. First of all, it'll make the boots look more like a manufactured article. And secondly, it will help to give them form. So we're going to start with our brush. We're going to multiply. And 30% again sounds good. We're going to pull a dark color out of there. And we're going to work a seam. And then we'll pull a light color. We'll change to screen. We'll keep it at around 30%, and we'll work the other side of that screen. Or we'll work the other side of that seam. Now these boots are either leather or something like leather, so we don't have to blend it out quite as much as we did up top here. Being a stiffer fabric, it will have a stiffer seam. And there, we've created the illusion of a boot. Now, see, I don't like this right here. It looks like the seam is a little crooked. It should probably be pulled a little bit closer to here. But again, since I'm working on a copy of the boots, I can do the whole thing over again and just work with that copy. So that's it for this tutorial. That was just a little bit of how to add some surface texture. And I think the next thing we'll do is we'll finish up this belt. We'll add a little bit of shadow for him to stand on, and then we'll be finished.